Well, New York City's major ink-on-paper publications churn out literally hundreds of pages of copy every single day. Now you factor in the blogs, vlogs, tweets, and you know-it-all co-workers at the water cooler, and there's just too much news to wade through before a fresh wave hits you the very next day. So here at BK Live, we've done some of the work for you, and you won't get any ink on your fingers or have to click away from that cat video on your desktop. But why stress? Right now, you can hear two of the city's best reporters share their insights on why the mayor can't get his housing plan past the community boards and just how far the state's mightiest legislator has fallen, among other things. Will Bredderman is a politics reporter at the New York Observer and a frequent guest here at BK Live. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me again.
Well, for the first time, we're happy to welcome from the Brooklyn paper, reporter Allegra Hobbs.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I don't know if it's the top or the bottom that we're starting at with Mayor de Blasio and the fact that he can't get a redevelopment plan. Everybody thinks 200,000 units of affordable housing being created or preserved is a good idea, but he couldn't get it past the community boards, Will.
You know, the issue right now is his mandatory inclusionary zoning plan, which you would obligate developers to build about 25 to 30% of their units for 60% of the area median income, which would be about $46,000 a year for a family of three. And I believe also another additional 30 would have to be preserved for or reserved for the people making about 80% of the area median income, which would be about $60,000 a year for a family of four, or family of three rather. The big complaint everyone keeps coming up with is they feel like it's just not enough. It just doesn't preserve enough at the very lowest levels of income, and especially in some of the neighborhoods that are slated for redevelopment in Brooklyn, most particularly East New York, which is supposed to be the first of 15 citywide that are going to get the de Blasio treatment. It's one of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City. It has a median income of about $34,000 a year. So
it's the last frontier in a lot of ways. East New York is in the spot now.
Right, and you've got multiple train lines out there at Broadway Junction. So it's an area that could be redeveloped, and de Blasio's plan really does call for that to become a mixed income neighborhood with some middle class housing, some low income housing. He says it's possible to do it without displacing anybody, without anybody getting priced out. Obviously, the local community board and now has disagreed, and now it's important to separate out. What's got rejected is the mandatory inclusionary zoning plan for the whole city. Right. The East New York development, that's going to have to get passed even further down the road and get approved even further down the road. But I saw Allegra had a piece last night on the vote in the Brooklyn Borough Board where it got shot down.
Well, Allegra, tell us about that one.
Yeah, it did get shut down. It was out of 16 city council members, only for the borough, only 9 showed up, and 2 abstained. Levin abstained, and Cornegie abstained. Okay. So that means that only 7 actually voted. The rest remained mum, and the 7 that voted it down and put through the borough board's recommendations. And what you were saying about the concerns for East New York with not enough consideration given to those that are the lowest earners. That's a consideration in other neighborhoods as well. I was at the community board
representing Bed-Stuy, and then Levin is Williamsburg.
Williamsburg and Greenpoint.
Yeah,
yes.
Greenpoint.
Yeah, but I was at the community board 4 meeting when they put it through with recommendations, and there were Bushwick residents very concerned that there wasn't enough consideration given to those earning between $20,000 a year and $30,000 a year. Yeah. There's consideration for those earning roughly $46,000, like you said, Will, but not for the lowest earners.
Like the lowest rung.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny. You spoke about all those train lines at Broadway Junction, sort of on the other end of the L train, closer to Bedford. You had a story about hotels there and how they're mixing things up with zoning and all of that stuff, and maybe some loss of jobs or space that is going to hotels.
Right. With Mayor de Blasio, he held a press conference in Greenpoint. There was concern about industrial business zones, is what you're referring to, which are zones that are supposed to be set aside for creating what it sounds like industrial businesses.
The White Hotel sitting in the middle of the
there are developers
space.
going in and putting in hotels, which is or storage facilities, which create very few jobs. Right. So the mayor wants to create, more rigid, hard-lined legislation that would preserve manufacturing jobs in manufacturing facilities in these zones.
Well, this is like the revitalization of Williamsburg, of course, was because of the proximity to the city, but also because of the abundance of those spaces that had gone fallow, where people started to eke out a living and the artists reclaim those warehouse spaces. That's something that we've seen to an extent in places like Red Hook and Sunset Park as well, where those things were flipping, but the city's sort of ushering Sunset Park a little more, but they might also be welcoming some parties there soon. That you were talking about these pop-up raves that have been the subject of a lot of debate.
Yes, to the dismay of some community members, yes. Yeah, there was the now rather infamous incident at the new hard plastics factory in Greenpoint, which is a Superfund site, which means it is on toxic land. A party promoter called City Fox attempted to throw a Halloween rave there. They acquired the proper permits from the State Liquor Authority and from the Department of Buildings, which are temporary permits in which you do not have to go through, the usual community board process. Community members caught wind of it and started calling 311. Ultimately, the fire department shut it down because they felt that there was not an adequate sprinkler system and that there were fire hazards. But it raised a host of other questions, such as, why they were given these permits when perhaps there should have been more consideration given to the safety of the venue.
So where are we going to party this summer then, if the pop-up raves have been
Well, there are still going to be pop-up raves, and in fact, Assemblyman Joe Lintle, who covers Greenpoint, when he caught wind of it, he was concerned, and he wrote a letter to the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, asking for more oversight from the government when it comes to who gets these permits and who is allowed in these facilities. He's not trying to stamp out pop-up raves or prevent people from partying. He just wants there to be a little more consideration given to the safety and quality of life of the neighborhoods.
Well, talking about legislation, we're back with Sheldon Silver now. The man is guilty on all counts, which was kind of surprising to some because this wasn't a smoking gun case where the lines were so direct. There's a lot of nuance that surrounds this thing, but the most powerful man in the state legislature is going to get a number soon.
Right, and he's not going to be in the state legislature now that he's been convicted. Yeah, Sheldon Silver's case was very interesting because it did not necessarily involve what they call an explicit quid quo pro, which literally means this for that. I give you money and you give me what I want, or vice versa. He had these sort of very interesting sort of back channels wherein he would either arrange, one case he arranged money to go to a mesothelioma center where the doctor agreed to refer his patients.
And this is all through his law firm.
All through one of his law firms, and then he added another law firm, which actually technically was not an employee of, but he was telling developers, particularly Glenwood Management, which is a major luxury developer, send your tax, what they call tax cert work, to this law firm that's run by my childhood friend, and comes out after new disclosure rules in 2011. This firm had been giving him referral fees. It was all done through this process of referral fees, which you could argue is shady, but the big question was, is it illegal? And that the jury decided yes, that is illegal. That is a what do you call a quid quo pro?
Victimless crime.
But well, I mean, technically, the case, which is very interesting, is that they made because he was charged with extortion. Besides the victims being the people of the state of New York who were deprived of his honest services, technically one of his victims was a developer because that qualifies as extortion. If you're being, if you're trying to get a tax break, a tax credit from the state, and he's telling you, well, by the way, I've got this friend with this law firm. Please send them your tax cert work. That was considered extortion. We'll see if it holds up on appeal. We saw just very recently the former state Senate Majority Leader Joe Bruno was convicted of honest services fraud and saw his conviction completely overturned, and then the people of the state of New York ended up having to pay his legal bills. So we'll see if this holds up. I'm certainly going to keep watching this.
Well, there's only one more possibly corrupt politician in the state legislature, and Dean Skelos and his son are in the midst of a trial right now. Yesterday, there was a lot of recordings that were released that were made for good listening. And how does the conviction of Silver bode for Skelos and son?
Well, the charges against Skelos, it's a matter of whereas here, the way a lawyer explained it to me this way: the charge against Silver was a matter of interpreting the law. What Silver did? Does it violate law? Skelos is trying to contest the facts of the case as being presented by the prosecution. So it's a little bit of a, not necessarily a complete apples and oranges comparison. There are a lot of parallels, including the fact that they were both accused of shaking down Glenwood management in some form. But it's a little bit different case. It seems to me as just a someone who's not going to law school and just a reporter that it's a little bit more clear cut than Sheldon Silver. Either he basically got payments for his son and no-show jobs for his son by exerting pressure on people, or he didn't. Yeah. And the recordings so far have been very colorful and very entertaining. But the evidence, is starting to pile up that suggests perhaps that was the case.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about more development. Brooklyn bike lanes. That's always fun.
That's always fun.
So what's happening over in the bike lane land in GP?
In Greenpoint, well, there is a possible plan to put a Greenway bike lane, the city to put a Greenway bike lane along through the areas we were just talking about, much of it being an industrial business zone and manufacturing along Commercial Street on the waterfront. Mm-hmm. And there is some concern from community members as well as workers in those manufacturing facilities that it's not the best place for a bike lane, that it would, cause the truck traffic coming in and out of the warehouses to get backed up, and that it would be possibly unsafe for the cyclist.
It's 2015, almost 16, and we're still fighting about bike lanes.
It matters to people.
It definitely matters to people. I'm a biker. I'm always on the side of a bike lane. So the argument is that it's going to back up the trucks where people shouldn't even be anyway. But clearly, people are moving into those neighborhoods. And
that's right. And in fact, there's a lot of development that's going to be coming to that very area in the next few years with the Greenpoint landing, and that's another concern is that, people are concerned the city, and putting these Greenway bike lanes in are not taking into consideration
is that why
the influx
is
of
abstaining and not voting on things? It's his district over there. So what is an underreported story that we've not been focused on in the midst of all this corruption?
One of the things that actually struck me from Allegra's story last night was one of the people who was conspicuously absent, one of the council members who was conspicuously absent from the borough board vote that would have incorporated the community board chair people, the borough president, and the council members, was Councilman David Greenfield. He represents Borough Park. He's also the chairman of the city's land use committee. So the future of the mandatory inclusionary zoning plan the mayor has goes through his committee. The road runs right basically through his front yard. And he abstained, he didn't show up, he didn't vote. And very recently there was this announcement that the city was going to fund security for private schools, and that's a great benefit to the yeshivas that are in, the religious Jewish schools that are in Councilman Greenfield's district. I think you got to begin to wonder, is something being, quid pro quo. It's completely legal, and it's how these things get sorted out. I think we saw a little bit of a prequel to this whole mix-up over zoning with the Astoria Cove project in Queens, where it got shot down by the community board, got shot down by the council member, got shot down by the borough president, and then it ended up passing. And there were some things that the mayor agreed to give the councilman's district in that case. So I think you're going to see some people, I think, that may withhold or sort of begin to sort of, are unwilling to commit themselves as of yet because they're hoping that perhaps there's going to be something that they can eke out, whether it's a park refurbishment or some stuff for a school or what have you, for their district from the mayor. So I'm looking forward to that process because he keeps saying, well, this is going to be decided ultimately by the city council. So, and that's where he can begin to try to, offer some things perhaps in exchange, because this is really, he's decided, a big part of his legacy.
Well, we'll keep watching that, especially when we had Daniel Drum here talking about the curriculum in the yeshivas and the fact that they're not meeting some standards according to a lot of folks in the community. So that's going to be a hotly watched thing we'll continue to work on. Okay, I'm sorry to make you the biking reporter too, but I just saw a story about the Idaho stop and its viability here. That's going to be our final word. Do you think we're going to see that? Reynoso is down with it.
Renault is down, but it's difficult to say. It's a little divisive. What you have cyclists saying is that, you know, these are laws that they're following anyway, although they're not the letter of the law yet. Right. You know, cyclists are saying, you know, we are treating often, you know, stop signs or stop lights as stop signs and stop signs as yield signs, which is the law of the land in Idaho. So you have cyclists saying, you know, look, this is what I'm doing anyway because it's perfectly safe. I am yielding to pedestrians. I am, you know, being conscientious of other, you know, drivers and pedestrians and cyclists. Right. But when I get pulled over, I get the same treatment as a 2-ton motor vehicle, and I get a $200 plus ticket. Yeah. So, you know, but then you have people raising concerns about, you know, saying that maybe cyclists should be treated the same as motor vehicles. They can still hit pedestrians, you know. They can still cause some damage, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
My bias is showing.
Renozo's behind it, and there's a lot of cyclists behind it.
Yeah, well, it's a great story, and even more enthusiastic than the story is the comments below, which I always get stuck reading everything. But I urge you to head over to the Brooklyn Papers and check out that story on the Idaho Stop with some real reporting from Idaho by Allegra on the Brooklyn Paper. And Will Bredderman, thank you for being here as well. We'll keep watching what's happening in the States.